Madam Chair, trustees, and fellow Canadians, today I present to you the plight of my people. We have come here together over the trauma experienced by our children receiving death threats. I bear good news and I bear bad news. The good news is that you are only a part of the problem. The bad news is that the problem is rather large. In April 1919, Mr. Gandhi called for peaceful resistance against British rule in India in the form of strike action. It went horribly wrong, and there was violence, destruction, and arson. A colleague asked Mr. Gandhi whether he had not lost moral authority over the nation, and Mr. Gandhi replied, "Moral authority comes to me without seeking and is retained without effort." My community stands before you today, Madam Chair, with a sense of moral authority. We are here because something is fundamentally wrong. We want you to cast a gaze upon us, for we carry the scars of 1,000 years of imperialism. We are the flip side of all the glory that was empire. We are the other 90% that suffered quietly. Today we stand before you as Canadians bearing the pains of decades of inequality in Canada. I fear that even to this day, we still not have shaken off all the shackles of empire. It is with this moral authority that we have come to instill upon you a small sense of regret and some sense of indignity. We are the dispossessed. We have been wronged, and Madam Chair, we are still watching. We have watched how our community, that has a high proportion of educated citizens, has been excluded, has been marginalized, and underrepresented. As a result, we have been denied equal access to justice, employment, and education. Let us look at these points closely: justice, employment, and education. Justice. We know how unworkable the human rights legislation is. We know that this board had amongst the highest number of human rights claims against it in Canada. But the Human Rights Tribunal remains slow and cumbersome, and as a result, many have lost the will to continue. Let us now look at employment. We need no longer to look at statistics to conclude that minorities, though well qualified, are underrepresented in many professions. Cause of many of the problems facing our community today. But wait, it seems we are overrepresented in some professions. We are overrepresented as taxi drivers, overrepresented as truck drivers and factory floor workers. The scenario then starts to play itself out. We are doing low-value jobs, and when we pay our taxes, they are used to create high-value jobs for other sectors of Canadian society that we do not belong to. You may call it what you like, but some of us are starting to call it neo-imperialism. There is something fundamentally wrong here, Madam Chair. There are strange forces at play, and we have been watching for far too long. Finally, let us look at the lack of access to education. I will speak about this in three parts: the reprimanding of our teachers, the barriers to promotion, and the effects on our students and parents. Let us look at the reprimanding element first. minority teachers in our board have been reprimanded for various shortcomings, and I would agree with some of them. I will not even bother to list them, but when I look at some of the shortcomings of the non-visible minority staff, it will all fall into perspective. You harbored a white supremacist in the 90s at Applewood Heights Secondary School. He affected the self-esteem of all the minority students down to its very core. When we complained, he was simply moved sideways to another institution. Can you imagine if this was reversed, Madam Chair? If a South Asian teacher had believed in Indian supremacy and that all whites should be enslaved